Well, hi everyone, and greetings from Northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy. You know, there are a couple of flat earthers that are famous around the world for having proven the globe Earth. One is Mr. 15 degree per hour drift himself, Bob Nodell. Thanks, Bob. The other one is the subject of today's video.
If you're seeing through this hole, through the next hole, and seeing the light at the backboard, or at 17 feet off the water, the Earth is flat. If he's holding it up at 23 feet high and we're seeing the light, well, that's because the Earth's curved. Enrique, how high is your light?
17 feet.
I mean, it's as, we don't see you, Enrique. Lift up your light way above your head. Interesting.
Now, I was informed by a comment on my community page the other day that Jeranism had done a hit piece on me in response to a video I had done about a year ago, debunking his video, 7 ways you can tell for yourself that we didn't really go to the moon. So apparently he's rather butthurt about this, and rather than go after his claims, which would be the typical debunker way of handling this, I'm going to look at the techniques that he uses to try and get back at me for debunking him. So let's cue up the music and get going. Well, guys, do you like my rotating globe graphic? Jeranism hates this. And I'm going to go ahead and use this as I pop up between segments of his video and discuss what he's talking about. So let's go ahead and get started.
Do you know who this is? Bob the Science Guy. First of all, I'm just saying, just putting it out there. I would not trust any member of my family in the same city limits as Bob the Science Guy. You can if you want. Everybody, it's my show, my opinion. You can make your show and say, oh, this is my best friend. I'll have him go for a walk with my son or daughter. Not me. Not in the same town. In fact, probably not in the same state. So I think he says he's from Michigan. Thank goodness, because if it was California, it'd be like, let's pack the bags. We're getting out of here. So he's doing a video on me. I guess he did a whole series on me. This is how little I watch anybody else. I couldn't care less. But when this guy emailed me saying I was a disingenuous prick, morally reprehensible individual, I said, well, what about? Why? What did I do wrong? Show me what Bob the Science Guy's got to say about it. And he is upset because I guess the name of this video is something to do with Jeranism doubts the moon stars. A lot of people have issues with this one because it's one of the biggest proofs that there is.
In such a dark background with objects so brightly lit by the sun, the aperture of the camera needed to be kept small in order to photograph the lander and the astronauts clearly and sharply, and not blurred objects from the Blair Witch Project or something. This invariably leaves the camera unable to pick up any faint starlight in the background sky. Again, this is no way for you to know for yourself.
Right.
It's no 7 easy ways for you to know for yourself.
The article was the 7 easy ways you can know for yourself that the Earth is a ball or something. But one of the things that it talks about is that, oh, well, the stars not being in the moon, this is the reason why. That's not a way to tell for yourself.
Well, let's go ahead and make something clear. I'm not here to refute Jeran's arguments, as silly as they are. I've already done that. The fact that we went to the moon is not subject to debate. We went to the moon. Now, the problem that you run into when you mud wrestle with a pig is, first of all, you gain nothing from that, and the pig seems to enjoy it. This is basically the case with Jeranism. Now, his argument is that because we can't see stars in the photos of the moon landings, we didn't land on the moon. First, that's silly. Second of all, there's a very good explanation for it, and that is the camera settings. Now, he doesn't accept that, but he doesn't give any reasons as to specifically why he doesn't accept it. He doesn't present any counter evidence. And in fact, I've actually taken pictures of the moon with my telescope. I've also taken pictures of Jupiter. And the thing that I've found is that both Jupiter and the moon are very bright objects. You have to turn the f-stop down and get the exposure rather short in order to get any detail on the surface of the moon or in the atmosphere of Jupiter. When you do that, you lose all the stars, and in fact, you lose the moons of Jupiter. Now, in order to see the moons of Jupiter and the stars, what you have to do is turn the exposure up. Jupiter and the moon both blur out, but eventually you can see stars and the moons of Jupiter. It has to do with the optics of the camera. So this is kind of a silly argument, and it's very well known, and it's something that you can verify yourself with a telescope. Not a problem.
The problem is that the astronauts themselves
Correct.
couldn't see stars on the moon.
And we've talked about it a million times. They could not see stars on the moon, and they couldn't see stars in interstellar space. And then you've got astronauts now on the ISS saying they can see stars. It's lit up like polka dots everywhere. There's millions of them, billions of them. And then you've got other astronauts like Leroy Chen telling you that you can't see stars on the day side of Earth or the night side of Earth. And you can't see, that you can't see them on the day side of Earth. You've got Neil deGrasse Tyson and other people saying you absolutely can.
Okay, so this is the next technique that he uses. He's got this appeal to authority. Well, astronauts said they couldn't see stars. Well, did they look? How do you explain the photographs of stars that we have from the ISS? You can't. This is a subtle way of poisoning the well, just like he did when he started off his argument by talking about me being unsafe around children and being a bad doctor. This is just a poisoning the well fallacy that he's using, and it's a typical technique that you will see when flat earthers have their butts handed to them by debunkers. But let's continue.
And there's no atmosphere.
Well, hi, everyone, and greetings from Northern Michigan. This is Bob, the Science Guy.
Oh, boy, creepy.
You know, today we have episode 4 of Jeranism's 7 Easy Ways You Can Tell for Yourself We Never Went to the Moon.
Correct.
In this episode, he's asking, where are the stars?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't the Apollo astronauts see or photograph stars while they were on the moon?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the conspiracy theory is that if they had photographed the stars, astronomers could have tracked them down and found out they weren't on the moon.
No, if they would have photographed stars, it would be difficult considering they were in a warehouse.
But that's really not the answer. The answer is they didn't photograph the stars because they weren't trying to photograph the stars.
Oh, they weren't trying.
They were there to photograph the moon.
Right.
Okay, did you see the classic flat earth technique that he's employing now? And that is the over-talking. Now, I'm making a cogent argument in my video, but rather than let my video play and let his listeners hear what I'm saying and the argument that I'm making, Jeran has to talk over me. Now, what's he saying? Really nothing. All he's doing is making noises and distractions. The only thing that he does slip in is this assertion that the moon landing was filmed in a warehouse somewhere. Now, like most conspiratorial thinking, in Jeran's mind, apparently, all you have to do to prove something is a fact is assert it. It doesn't work that way. In order to prove that the moon landing was filmed in a warehouse, you would need a script, you would need eyewitnesses, maybe a clipping from the clipping room floor showing the lunar module, the astronauts all suited up, and a studio light, and maybe a stagehand. And most importantly, you'd have to demonstrate that Armstrong or Collins or Aldrin were actually in Albuquerque, New Mexico when they were supposedly up by the moon. He doesn't do any of these things. All he does is make the assertion. And his audience will take that as gospel because Jeran asserted it. But let's continue. They were there to photograph the moon.
Right.
And as a result, their camera apertures and shutter speed.
Because with imagine no atmosphere on the moon, it would be just breathtaking. But you know what? These guys are consummate professionals. So they're not there to take, this is beautiful. Can we take pictures of the stars? No. You're there to picture the moon. Get it together. Well, what about, can we take them in the future? No. None of our 6 missions will take any pictures of any stars. Period. We got shit to do. We've got to pick up this dust.
If nothing else, you have to appreciate Jeranism's way of doing this. He seems to try and make this sound so ridiculous. Well, first of all, the astronauts were consummate professionals. They were there to get shit done and pick up dust. That was why they were there. They weren't there for a star party. They weren't there for stargazing. And furthermore, it was daytime on the moon. It's bright during the daytime on the moon. They get just as much light per square meter on the moon as we get here on Earth. As a matter of fact, just a little bit more. And the reason for that is the moon and the Earth are about the same distance from the sun. It's light during the daytime on the moon and on Earth. We don't see stars for the most part in the sky during the day on Earth. You won't see them during the day on the moon either. So, again, that's his point. Take it as you may. But look at the technique. were set to deal with the bright conditions on the surface of the moon.
It's not that bright, not as bright as it should be. There's no camera that could recover from the possible brightness that would be there using the inverse square law of light, figure out how bright the moon would be. With them standing on it, it would burn their eyes and completely destroy any film ever, as radiation would do too. But again, I mean, these guys are just, when you believe in the moon landing, man, you are just, it's like talking to a religious person.
Now, a couple of quick things. It's no brighter on the moon than it is on a desert here on Earth. The amount of light that the moon receives is about the same as the amount of light that the Earth receives. They're both the same distance from the sun. Now, if you would like to know about this nonsense that he's bringing up about the inverse square law, go ahead and have a look at this video from Blue Marble Science. He explains it very, very well. Jeran has no clue as to what he's talking about. So let's go ahead and continue.
Give me more of your religion, Bob, please. Let's go.
And as a result, their cameras were set to properly...
I mean, look at this globe behind him. Come on. I mean, he thinks he's just spinning in space on that thing. They have done a number on people's minds.
Their subject.
Wow.
They didn't see the stars because if they had set the cameras to photograph the stars, the moon would have simply been glared out.
Of course, and they only had one camera. Only had one, so they couldn't be like set these 14 cameras for the moon and one for the stars. That would be too difficult. There was only a certain amount of people. All right.
Boy, that was a flurry of activity, wasn't it? We got another ad hom or two in against me. We had Jeran try and equivocate religion and verifiable evidence. Religion, as you know, is based on belief. The moon landings are verifiable fact. And when it suited him, when he wanted to make fun of my globe, he corrected the image. Again, nobody thinks that that's the real world. That's a graphic. It's a rather cool graphic. As a matter of fact, he's used this graphic in the past himself. So, be that as it may, there he goes. That's just a typical way that the flat earthers argue their point. They don't argue the point itself. They don't try and refute the evidence that is presented against them. They just attack the person presenting it. So let's go ahead and continue.
Right,
but we'll go through this and listen to Jeran's argument and see what we can figure out with it.
Yeah, please.
So cue up the music and let's go.
No. What the hell is this? We don't want any music. First of all, that does not look like you, sir. Okay? First of all, your hair is like way back, way more bald than that.
Well, so Jeran doesn't like my cartoon. Do you like that one a little bit better? Does that look a little more like me? Is it sufficiently bald for you? Well, here you go, Jeran. I can go to the hair club for men if I worry about my receding hairline. You'll always be stupid.
Because there's astronauts that have been caught saying both. You can see them, you can't see them. You can from the day side, you can't from the day side. We've shown it many times, and then you just have Globers that'll get on there and make excuses for these guys. Like, well, what he's actually saying. No, we don't even know what he's actually saying. We can hear what he's saying.
Could you tell us something about what the sky actually looks like from the moon, the sun, the earth, the stars, if any, and so on?
Yeah,
so what the sky looked like from the moon, the sun.
In some reports I've seen planets. I myself did not see planets from the surface, but I suspect they might be visible.
So they couldn't see stars. They couldn't see anything other than the Earth. But do you see his problem with speaking about this is because of the fact that they knew there weren't going to be...
Well, here's where the conspiracy storytellers start going off the rails in their delusions.
Who's going off the rails in their delusions? You have that spinning water ball behind you. Dumbass.
Tend to take them over. Now, the interviewer asked Neil Armstrong if he saw objects in the sky, and Armstrong said, yes, I saw the Earth. And I saw the sun. They're the brightest objects in the sky. The next brightest objects would be the local planets. And he did report that some people had claimed...
Who are these some people? Who? Wasn't that interview done right after?
...to have seen some planets, but he didn't see any personally.
No, he didn't.
They certainly didn't see any stars, both on the surface...
So if I can go outside and I can see the planets, quite obviously, even if I'm standing underneath a streetlight, you don't think
this is the moon and in the cislunar space. Now, what Jeran is trying to do is take that statement to
tell me what I'm trying to
add to it a level of sinister intent.
Right, because when people are deceiving you and telling lies, that is sinister.
Then Jeran takes that statement and moves it on to say that or imply that that's because he knew the stars wouldn't be there.
They were in a warehouse.
In a way, he did know the stars wouldn't be there because he wouldn't be able to see them.
Oh.
Doesn't mean that the stars were not physically there.
What?
Well, Jeranism, I hate to break it to you, but verification that we went to the moon is simply not dependent on whether or not the astronauts could or could not see stars. It has to do with the tracking of the capsules to and from the moon. It has to do with the eyewitnesses involved in the mission. It has to do with the samples that we returned from the moon and the experiments we left on the surface, some of which, specifically the laser range reflectors, are functional to this day. So you're really backing the wrong horse here. This isn't your real argument. But carry on.
In a vacuum. And they're using a little sextant to pick up stars so they know the direction to go? Wouldn't you just go towards the big blue ball? Dumbass. Wow.
What did they shoot? Stars. Okay, so once again, he's calling me a dumbass for claiming that there is a sextant in the Apollo capsule. It says it's religious faith that lets me believe that it is. Well, there's the sextant. That's the sextant from the Apollo capsule. I'll go ahead and actually put a link to a discussion of the sextant in the Apollo capsule. Now, he does raise a very valid question, which actually has an interesting answer, and that is, why would the Apollo spacecraft have a sextant in it? Well, during the Apollo missions, it was the height of the Cold War, and there was serious consideration given to the Russians, the Soviets, trying to jam our communications with the Apollo crews, putting the space missions in jeopardy. We couldn't give them guidance. They had to have a way to develop their own guidance. And a sextant does not require electrical power, and it's very reliable to help find a position in space. It was used very extensively by Jim Lovell in Apollo 8. It was used by every Apollo mission subsequent to Apollo 8. Now, Collins attempted to locate the Apollo 11 landing site using the sextant, which also functioned as a 24-power telescope. He wasn't able to locate it because the Apollo lander did not land at its designated landing spot. It was about 5 miles away. Now, on subsequent missions, they were indeed able to see the lunar module on the moon from lunar orbit using the sextant. It was used throughout the entire voyage for everything from translunar insertion to reentry. It's a documented fact. It's not in question.
Because he knew that in the simulated environment in the studio, the Earth is the only visible thing in the sky.
Oh, sorry, let me give this.
In the simulated environment in the studio, there was going to be no stars. So when he says, could you see any stars from the surface? Well, the Earth is the only visible thing in the sky.
Believe me, he was told ahead of time, but by the way, we're not going to be able to have any stars. So there's not going to be stars in the footage, and we'll just say that the aperture wasn't correct, right? But
just as a quick interjection here, a side note, in 2001, A Space Odyssey, which was filmed a year or two before the actual Apollo moon missions, they had stars in space. They were quite capable of generating that on CGI in cinematography back in the mid-60s. Just thought I'd add that.
Right, but then he goes on these interview shows and they're asking him, could you see stars? And you just see, look at his face. Well, yes, and some people did, but not me. And they're not really there, but sometimes.
What am I supposed to say here?
See, you thought I was kidding.
What?
He actually did make that leap of logic.
There's no leap of logic.
Now, those of us that are boomers and actually heard...
You're not a boomer, dude. You're 1 foot away from the rest of them.
Neil Armstrong talk. That's just the way he talks. He's a very slow, deliberate
and a hero. You forgot that.
Man.
Yeah, right.
Listen to YouTube videos of Neil Armstrong talking after Gemini 8 or after the Apollo 11 mission.
Of course, yes.
You'll hear him give this long, deliberate
because
speech.
He's very careful. If you told a big lie that you have to go give speeches about, you're going to be really careful about the truth that you tell these students, that they must remove the veil of secrecy that surround. Give me a break. What do you? oh, he talks so slow. This way, we need to be, no matter what he did, you're going to call me here.
Contemplation. That's just the way he talks.
Yeah, just,
you know, I actually find this kind of funny. One thing that you'll notice throughout this video, you notice the gentleman from the United Kingdom that was interviewing Neil Armstrong had a very peculiar accent. He had an English accent. Listen to Jeran's accent. Is it the same as mine? What's my accent like? Do I have a lot of inflection in my voice? Am I real animated when I speak? No, I'm not. It's actually something that I have to work on because I have a YouTube channel. But my speech is rather flat. That's because I'm a Midwesterner. I'm from Michigan. This is the way we talk. Neil Armstrong is from Ohio, which is the next state over, also in the Midwest. Now ask yourself, does Neil Armstrong talk like Jeran, or does he talk like me? And quite frankly, if you heard my father, who's an engineer like Neil Armstrong was, who also grew up in the Midwest like Neil Armstrong did, they sound almost exactly alike. Their manners of speech are almost identical. It is a regional accent.
You're one of the very, very few people, I think, whose opinion on this is really worth having. In fact, there are only 4 of you. Do you think, from your knowledge of the moon, having been there, that it is going to be possible in the foreseeable future?
So, you've been there. Is it going to be possible in the foreseeable future to what?
To set up scientific bases there.
To set up scientific bases there, right? Now, remember, what do you think they told these guys back in '69? Do you think they told them, we're going to go fake the moon because we can never get there? Or do you think they were told, we're going to go fake the moon because Kennedy made a pronouncement that we would go there and we would beat the Russians and we need to at least make it look like we did. And eventually we'll go there. So don't worry. You'll be heroes. You'll be doing the nation a favor. You'll be getting a bunch of people riled up about the United States and it's going to be rah-rah and we're going to have a bunch of so many inventions come from so many jobs. You're going to be responsible for giving millions of people jobs, Neil. But we'll eventually go there. Which one do you think?
Well, Jeran, I think what they were told was they were going to the moon, and they went to the moon. Now, these are people that had been involved in the space program. Neil Armstrong became an astronaut in 1963. He was on Gemini 8, which tested the rendezvous procedures to go to the moon. They were all part of this rather small club of astronauts that were deeply involved in this program. There was no question they were going to the moon. There was no faking involved. And by the way, he said something very critical there, and that was that there are only 4 people that have been to the moon. So this is after Apollo 12. So you had Apollo 11 and Apollo 12. So you asked earlier, like, who are these people that claim to have seen it? Well, it had been the other astronauts that had been to the moon. It had been other astronauts that had been in space. Now, you can easily see stars in space. You just need one or more of 3 different things. One, you need to have a reason to look at them and photograph them. Second, you need to have leisure time to recreationally observe them. And you need a time exposure. And we have those from the International Space Station. Here they are. There are stars on space. Notice that the Earth itself is pretty washed out. That's just the way it is. You need a time exposure. So I don't have a problem with that. I don't see why you do.
Oh, I'm quite certain that we'll have such bases.
So we're quite certain that we're going to have bases on the moon. That's good.
In our lifetime.
Wrong. For those who don't know, Neil Armstrong is no longer with us.
Está muerto.
So that means his lifetime is now over.
Right.
And do we have bases on the moon, or did we never go back?
Right. It's not that we don't just have bases. He was saying we would have bases there, manned outposts. We've never gone back. We've never even gone back. And this guy's telling us we're going to have outposts there. Probably a Starbucks, maybe a movie theater, Ad Astra. I mean, it's going to be Tom Cruise going to do a couple movies there. It's all happening.
Well, Jeran, let me help you out a little bit because I know your ability to understand and comprehend this is a little, shall we say, impaired. The Apollo program was a Cold War era program. The stated goal of the Apollo program is to get to the moon before the Soviets. We did that. We won the space race. Once we won, there wasn't a lot of popular support to keep doing it. Mission accomplished. Now, the other thing is that President Nixon made a decision on the executive level that we wanted to move away from missions of exploration to the moon into utilization of space. So we started working on long-term habitation of low Earth orbit, starting with Skylab and ending up with the International Space Station, with a space shuttle program worked in between. Now, have we been to the moon? Of course we've been to the moon many times. We had the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter in orbit around the moon. Other countries have sent rovers to the moon. We don't necessarily need to endanger human life to go there right now. Now, we are going back to the moon to set it up as a base, basically a refueling station for eventual trips to Mars. But we haven't had a lot of incentive to go back to the moon, and it's really quite an unfortunate thing that we didn't, because I think we could have gotten a lot accomplished. Now, could we have done that had we kept going in the 1960s? Well, if the television series on Apple TV called For All Mankind is any indication, where they were going through Apollo 27, they were launching the Sea Dragon, they were doing nuclear-powered space shuttles. These were all things that were possible. And at the end of the last season, humans were setting foot on Mars in 1995. That was doable. We opted not to do it. And that was a decision based on political concerns. It wasn't based on scientific ability. So that's that.
Somewhat like the Antarctic stations.
Oh, yeah, Antarctic Station. We got tons of bases down there, all kinds of people manning that. Moon is almost identical.
And similar scientific outposts.
Tons of scientific outposts on the moon.
Continually manned.
Continually manned. Not just like one mission. We're going to have people there. We're going to have craft going back and forth. They're going to stop there, get out. You'll be staying here for 6 months, pick up this group, take them back to the Earth, drop them in the ocean. It's going to be awesome. And it would be in his lifetime.
Oh, continually manned. This is said by somebody who thinks that, he's been told, well, we'll eventually get there. We just can't get there now. Mm-hmm. We need you guys to pretend like we did. It will boost morale.
Right.
The entire country will get behind you. You'll get paraded. You'll get celebrated. Parades. And then we'll eventually get there in the future.
And by the way, they all divorced their wives.
Now we're going back to the technique now where you assert something and therefore it must be true. You still haven't proven that they were told that they were going to do this someday and they have to fake it for now. That's an assertion that you made, which is a baseless assertion. And it also flies in the face of verifiable evidence. You go on then to attack the character of the astronauts. And quite frankly, I'm not going to dignify that by allowing you to put it out on this channel. Just not going to do it.
The guy made a little plug. If everybody does that, then I think that's the safest method to get this craft to the moon and back. I get it.
Hey, Jeran, remember I told you that my dad was a mechanical engineer? He worked on the space program. Kiss my ass.
Totally.
Was the first man on the moon because of the sacrifices of those people.
Yes, I know.
His rotation was not scheduled to come up for Apollo 11.
Right. No, he got
was
lucky.
moved forward
Yeah, he got lucky.
when the entire crew of Gemini 9 was killed in a plane crash.
Yeah, I remember.
Do you know their names,
And what do you
Jeran?
think about that one, too? What do you think
Do you
about
know
that
the
one?
names of the 3 astronauts that died in the Apollo 1 fire?
Of course. Everybody does. I've done videos
To
on
suggest that Neil Armstrong was part of a fraud, that Buzz Aldrin was part of a fraud.
it. This is a hero?
And by the way, you're probably pretty lucky you didn't call him a fraud. You know what he does with them.
But Buzz Aldrin? I'm lucky I'm calling him a fraud right now. Hello? Do you hear me what I'm saying? Tell Buzz Aldrin to come hit me if that's what he needs to do. Again, if somebody told me, Jeran, you've never been to Hawaii. I guess I have. No, you haven't. All right, whatever you say. I wouldn't punch them. And this is celebrated by you? You do know it is a crime to hit somebody. But in your case, as long as they're about science, doesn't matter. You hit whoever you want.
Well, let me just say this, Jeran. If Buzz Aldrin punched you, you probably wouldn't want me sitting on his jury. Now, as far as the rest of your ramblings, I'm going to let the audience take that as they may. You know, your nonsense about COVID and everything for the last 2 years being COVID related, suggesting that Neil Armstrong died of COVID when his cause of death is well known. You know, your personal attacks against the astronauts, your personal attacks against me. You know, one of the things that you mentioned in this diatribe that you have is that I never would debate you. Well, there's a reason for that, Jeran. First of all, I don't debate facts. The Earth is a sphere. We went to the moon. Those are facts. They're verifiable. I'm not going to debate them with the likes of you. But if you really want to have a debate with me, I'm game. But I do have a test for you to take first. Now, go to this video and get your answers ready, because you're going to have to provide those answers to me, and I'll decide whether you answered those questions correctly before I consent to a debate with you. But in the meantime, this is Bob the Science Guy, signing out from Northern Michigan. Thank you very much for spending a few minutes with me today. Remember to hit like on this video and subscribe to my new channel here. I look forward to seeing you all over here and getting Team Bob back together. It's time to get the band back together, folks. So take care.